Quillen Mythos always hated the sound of his own name. It sounded like someone had swallowed a thesaurus and vomited a sci-fi protagonist. Quillen Mythos, Zen archaeologist at large, he muttered to himself, voice drowned out by the incessant hum of the excavation rigs. He adjusted his helmet, trying to ignore the fact that it felt like a small rodent was trying to burrow into his scalp. Maybe it was his hair, or maybe it was the existential dread of being stuck in the ascent of the universe, digging up alien junk. Orinth was a satellite metropolis, or what was left of it anyway. Imagine a glittering city floating in the vast expanse of space, then strip away the glitter, add layers of rust, and sprinkle in the occasional explosive decompression hazard. Voila! You had Orinth. It was like someone had tried to build a utopia and ended up with a post-apocalyptic theme park, a place where dreams went to die alongside their dreamers. Quillen, you got a sec. A voice crackled over the comms, pulling him out of his reverie. It was Jax, his right-hand man, the kind of guy who'd stab you in the back with a smile, but only if you were asking for it. Only if it's about alien treasure, food, or ways to off the captain without getting caught, Quillen replied, flicking a switch on the console. A few meters away, Jax was hunched over a data pad, looking like he was trying to decipher a particularly cryptic crossword puzzle. Why not all three? Jax chuckled, nodding towards the dig site. Come take a look. This one's interesting. Quillen ambled over, the soles of his boots crunching against the ancient, dust-covered surface of Orinth. He squinted at the array of holographic projections swirling above the data pad. Looks like a rock, he said, unimpressed. A rock, sure, Jax nodded, but it's a rock that could make us rich or kill us, or both. See this. He pointed to the glowing symbols dancing around the artifact. Precursor tech, maybe even older. Great. I always wanted to die in the pursuit of academic excellence, Quillen said, leaning closer. The artifact was a twisted, jagged thing, like a piece of modern art created by a blind cat with a vendetta against geometry. Any idea what it does? No clue, Jax admitted, but the eggheads are all excited about the energy readings. Apparently it's still active. Of course it is, Quillen sighed. Wouldn't be fun if it was just a hunk of dead metal. As they spoke, the rest of the team milled about like ants on a sugar high. There was Yara, the tech specialist, arguing with a malfunctioning drone. Emmett, the muscle, who looked like he wrestled space bears for fun, and Ren, the medtech, who had the bedside manner of a drunken pirate. Hey, Quillen, Yara shouted over the noise, frustration coloring her voice. This damn drone's about as useful as a chocolate teapot. Kick it, Quillen suggested. That usually works. If it doesn't, Jax chimed in, at least you'll feel better. The team shared a collective snort of laughter, the kind that masks just how close they all were to unraveling. It was the kind of humor that kept you sane while wading through the ruins of lost civilizations, hoping you didn't wake up some ancient death trap. Quillen turned his attention back to the artifact. Why do I get the feeling we're being watched? He murmured, half to himself. Because we are, Jax replied, all nonchalance. You forget about the constant surveillance. Not them, Quillen said, waving it off. Something else. And just like that, the air around them seemed to change. A subtle shift, like a whisper just out of earshot. The artifact pulsed, a dim glow emanating from its core, casting eerie shadows on the ruins around them. Please tell me that's normal, Yara said, her voice tinged with unease. If by normal you mean terrifyingly abnormal, then sure, Quillen replied, feeling the hairs on the back of his neck standing to attention. Let's see what the experts think. They gathered around the artifact, each of them trying to make sense of it, like a group of cavemen staring at a smartphone. Quillen wondered if the artifact was laughing at them, laughing or plotting their demise, or both. Maybe it's a giant toaster, Ren quipped, earning a few nervous chuckles. You know, for cosmic bread. Or maybe it's the key to infinite power, Emmett added, flexing his biceps in a mock display of grandeur. World domination, anyone. I'll settle for not dying, Quillen said, eyeing the artifact with a mix of curiosity and dread. Who knows what this thing could do? The artifact pulsed again, a low hum echoing through the ruins like the breath of a sleeping giant. It was both fascinating and unsettling, a reminder of how little they understood about the universe and its mysteries. "Whatever it is," Jack said, voice low and serious, "it's not friendly." "Well, that's just perfect," Quillen muttered, feeling a chill run down his spine. "Let's poke it with a stick and see what happens." The artifact's glow intensified, casting long, sinister shadows across the team's faces. They stood there, transfixed, like moths drawn to a particularly hazardous flame. "We could always leave it here," Yara suggested, her voice betraying her unease. "Pretend we never found it, and miss out on the chance to meet a gruesome end," Jax replied with mock horror. "What kind of explorers are you? The smart kind," Wren pointed out dryly. Quillen sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Okay, let's document this thing, then get out of here. We can let the higher-ups deal with the fallout." With that, they set about their tasks, documenting every inch of the artifact, aware that they were treading on dangerous ground. It felt like they were on the brink of awakening something that should have stayed buried. As they worked, Quillen couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Not by cameras or drones, but by something ancient and powerful, something that had been waiting for them. "Quillen," Jack said suddenly, breaking the silence. "You ever feel like we're the punchline to a cosmic joke?" Quillen grinned, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Every damn day, Jax, every damn day." The team continued their work, the mood tense and uneasy. Each of them was aware that they were standing on the precipice of something monumental, something that could change everything, or end it all. Hours passed, each tick of the clock waited with the possibility of discovery or disaster. The artifact remained a silent sentinel, its glow a constant reminder of the unknown. "This is the last of it," Yara announced, stowing her gear with a sigh of relief. "Let's get the hell out of here." Quillen nodded, feeling the weight of their discovery pressing down on him. As they prepared to leave, he couldn't help but glance back at the artifact one last time. It pulsed, a single slow heartbeat that seemed to echo the words in his head. "Welcome to the end, Quillen Mythos." With a shiver, he turned away, leading his team back to the dubious safety of their ship, unaware of the chain reaction they had just set in motion. The artifact's glow faded, but its presence lingered, a promise of things to come. In the ruins of Orinth, shadows stretched long and dark, whispering secrets to those daring enough to listen. Quillen Mythos and his team were about to learn just how dangerous curiosity could be. Quillen Mythos, despite the grandiosity of his accursed name, had a knack for bad timing. As he and his team trudged back to their ship, the ominous pulse of the artifact still thrumming in their ears like an ancient hangover, he couldn't shake the feeling something was about to go horribly wrong. Not that it was unusual. Things going wrong was practically the job description out here. "We should have packed vacation brochures," Jax quipped as the crew huddled together, misty breaths mingling in the frigid air. "Maybe get a holiday home with less chance of dismemberment." Quillen managed a dry chuckle. "No one warned me xenorchaeology would involve so much running for your life. Just think of it as an extreme sport," Wren shot back, her voice carrying a smirk. "Like skydiving but with more screaming." They moved quickly, a ragtag group of tired souls navigating the skeletal remains of Orinth. The satellite Metropolis was a tragic beauty, like a faded postcard from a vacation you'd rather forget. Everything about it screamed danger, from the precariously hanging conduits to the corridors that seemed to twist even when you weren't looking. "Keep your eyes peeled," Quillen warned, glancing at Jax. "And your knives sharper." Jax nodded, patting the handle of his trusty blade. "You know me, never leave home without him." The ship loomed in the distance, a comforting silhouette against the backdrop of shimmering debris. Safety was a relative term here, but anything with solid walls and a lack of explosive decompression was close enough for Quillen. Just as they were about to reach the gangway, a sharp crackle buzzed through their comms like an angry wasp. "Contact," Yara hissed, already scrambling for cover. Her hands flew over her data pad, eyes wide as she scanned the incoming signals. We've got company, and it ain't the friendly kind. Quillen felt his stomach drop. Vexari, looks like, she confirmed, a frown deepening her features. And they're coming in hot. The Vexari. Alien bastards with the manners of a junkyard dog and the diplomacy of a rabid bear. Quillen had crossed paths with them before, and it never ended well. They were relentless, cunning, and had an unnerving habit of showing up at the worst possible times, like now, for instance. Shit, Emmett grunted, flexing fingers that could probably crush skulls like overripe melons. Let's just hope they want to chat about the weather. Yeah, I'm sure they're just here for tea and biscuits, Jax retorted, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Maybe they want to trade recipes. Quillen's mind raced, calculating their options as the shadows of the Vexari ships danced across the surface of Orinth. Retreat was the obvious choice, but not without leaving the artifact, or worse, letting it fall into the wrong hands. Yara, can you scramble their sensors? He asked, a plan forming amidst the chaos. She nodded, fingers darting over her data pad. On it. I just need a minute. Emmett, cover her, Quillen ordered, and Emmett was already moving, positioning himself between Yara and the approaching threat. As the distant rumble of Vexari engines grew louder, Quillen felt a cold sweat trickle down his back. It was always like this, teetering on the edge of disaster. But this time it felt different, more like a nosedive than a balancing act. Jax, get the ship ready to launch, Quillen instructed, voice steady despite the turmoil. We're not sticking around for their welcoming committee. The air was thick with tension, each second stretching like a rubber band about to snap. The Vexari were close now, their ships sleek and menacing as they hovered overhead, thrusters glowing like hungry eyes. Almost there, Yara muttered, her tongue poking out in concentration. The holographic projections flickered above her, a dance of data and light. Quillen, Jax's voice crackled over the comms, urgency cutting through the static. We've got a problem. They've locked onto the artifact's signal. Of course they had. If there was one thing the universe loved more than screwing with Quillen, it was doing so with a sense of dramatic irony. Yara, can you mask it? Quillen demanded, glancing between her and the looming Vexari ships. We can't let them get their claws on it. I'm trying, she snapped, a bead of sweat trickling down her temple. But there's interference. It's like the damn thing's fighting back. Perfect, Wren muttered, rolling her eyes. An artifact with a mind of its own. Quillen didn't have time to ponder the implications as the first shots were fired, bright streaks of energy cutting through the darkness like murderous fireflies. Orinth's decaying structures shuddered under the impact, debris raining down with a cacophony of destruction. Move, Quillen barked, urgency spurring them into action. They scattered, each of them a blur of motion amidst the chaos. The ship was tantalizingly close, a beacon of survival in a rapidly collapsing situation. Get to the ship, he yelled, adrenaline propelling him forward. I'll cover you. He didn't wait for a response, raising his weapon and firing at the Vexari with the precision of someone who'd been in too many of these situations. The Vexari responded in kind, their return fire sizzling past him with lethal intent. The battle was a dance of desperation, each step fraught with peril as Quillen and his team fought their way to safety. The artifact's pulse was a constant presence in the back of his mind, its enigmatic power a ticking time bomb. We're not gonna make it, Wren shouted, ducking behind a twisted metal beam. Her voice was a mix of fear and frustration, a sentiment Quillen shared. We don't have a choice, he replied, firing off another volley. Keep moving. The ship's gangway loomed ahead, a lifeline in the storm. Quillen could see Jax at the controls, his expression as tense as a coiled spring as he prepped for launch. Get on board, Quillen ordered, covering his team as they dashed across the final stretch. The Vexari were relentless, their ships circling like vultures. Quillen was the last to reach the gangway, his heart pounding in his chest as he sprinted up the ramp. Shots rang out around him, each one closer than the last. He barely had time to catch his breath before the ship's door slammed shut behind him, sealing them inside. Punch it, Jax, he shouted, collapsing into a seat as the engines roared to life. The ship shuddered beneath them, lifting off with a lurch that sent his stomach somersaulting. As they broke free from Orinth's gravity, Quillen allowed himself a moment of respite. But it was short-lived, the reality of their situation crashing down like a wave. "They're still on us," Jax warned, his eyes glued to the readouts. "And they won't give up easy." "Can we lose them?" Yara asked, her fingers still dancing over her data pad as she worked to mask their signal. "Working on it," Jax replied, his voice a mix of concentration and irritation. "But they're persistent little shits." Quillen closed his eyes, exhaustion creeping in alongside the adrenaline. The artifact's pulse was still there, a whisper in the back of his mind. Whatever they'd found on Orinth, it was far more than they'd bargained for. "What's our plan?" Emmett asked, his tone calm despite the tension. "We can't keep running forever." Quillen opened his eyes, meeting each of his team members' gazes in turn. They were tired, worn down by the endless cycle of danger and escape. Yet beneath the fatigue there was determination, a shared resolve that kept them going. "We fight," Quillen said finally, his voice steady and sure. "But not on their terms." He leaned forward, a glint of defiance in his eyes. "We need to figure out what this artifact is and why it's so damn important. Then we use it against them." "Turn their own weapon back on him?" Jax asked, a smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I like it. But first," Wren interjected, her voice dry as she gestured to the chaos outside the ship, "let's not get blown to bits." "Details," Quillen replied with a wry grin, though his heart wasn't quite in it. The Vexari were relentless, and their situation was precarious at best. The ship rocked beneath another volley of enemy fire, a reminder of just how close they were to disaster. But Quillen and his team had faced worse odds before, and they weren't about to back down now. "Hang on," Jax announced, his voice carrying the promise of a roller coaster ride. "Things are about to get bumpy." With a sharp turn, the ship veered off course, skimming the edges of Orinth's ruins in a daring maneuver designed to shake their pursuers. The Vexari followed, their ships weaving through the debris with alarming precision. Quillen gripped his seat, the world spinning as Jax pushed the ship to its limits. The Vexari were relentless, but so were they, a ragtag band of survivors with more grit than sense. "Anytime you want to pull a miracle out of your ass, Jax, now's the time," Yara called, her voice tinged with both fear and exhilaration. "Working on it," Jax replied, flashing a grin that was equal parts confidence and insanity. "Just keep those shields up." The ship hurtled through the wreckage, the Vexari hot on their heels. It was a deadly dance, each side vying for dominance in a game where the stakes were life and death. Quillen watched the stars blur past, his mind racing with possibilities. The artifact was their ace in the hole, but they'd have to figure out how to use it before the Vexari got the chance. "Whatever happens," he said, voice low and fierce, "we don't let them win." His team nodded, their resolve as unwavering as the cold metal beneath their feet. They were in this together, come what may. As the ship shot forward, leaving Orinth and the Vexari behind, Quillen couldn't help but feel the weight of their discovery pressing down on him. The artifact was a mystery wrapped in danger, and they were about to unravel it one perilous step at a time. And if the universe wanted a cosmic joke, well, Quillen was ready to laugh in its face. Quillen peered through the viewport, the stars a blur as Jax pushed their rust-bucket ship to its absolute limits. It wasn't exactly a luxury liner, but the old girl had guts, even if she did rattle like a box of angry marbles every time they took a hard turn. "Jax, you sure this thing won't fall apart before the Vexari do?" Quillen asked, bracing himself as the ship bucked. "Hey, trust me, she'll hold," Jax shot back with a grin that didn't inspire confidence so much as an urge to hold onto something solid. "Besides, if she doesn't, well, we'll be too dead to care." "Great," Wren muttered, eyes fixed on her weapon as she checked the charge. "Nothing like a little existential crisis before breakfast." Yara was hunched over her data pad, fingers flying like she was trying to win a galactic typing competition. "Guys, I've got something here," she said, her voice taut with a mix of excitement and dread. I think the artifacts triggered some sort of network, like a web of connections throughout Orinth. A web, Quillen echoed, arching an eyebrow. Of what? Ancient alien cat videos. More like a series of dormant systems, Yara replied, shooting him a look that could strip paint. Whatever this artifact is, it's like a key, and we've just unlocked the door. Well, that's just fantastic, Emmett grumbled from his perch near the hatch, where he was doing his best impression of a human barricade. Because we didn't have enough problems already. And get this, Yara continued, her eyes glued to the data pad. It's attracted the attention of some new friends, Seraphites. Seraphites? Jax asked, the name sounding like a bad punchline to a joke no one wanted to hear. Great, more cosmic assholes, Ren interjected, her smirk doing little to hide the tension etched into her features. Who are they, and why do they sound like a cult? They are worse, Yara said, her tone as grim as a funeral dirge. They think they're the galaxy's rightful rulers, and they don't take kindly to competition. Perfect, Quillen sighed, running a hand through his hair. So now we've got god-complex aliens on our asses too. Any chance they just want to invite us to a nice interstellar potluck? Not unless we're the main course, Emmett said, his voice dry as a desert bone. The ship jolted again, and Quillen felt his stomach lurch as Jax pulled another reckless maneuver. It was a twisted dance of survival, one slip-up away from a very messy end. We're clear of Orinth, Jax announced, his voice taut with concentration. But those Seraphites, they're coming in hot and fast. Of course they are, Quillen muttered, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Yara, can you get a read on what they are after? Besides adding us to their collection of cosmic roadkill, working on it, she replied, eyes flicking across the streams of data like she was divining the future. But whatever that artifact activated, it's big. Bigger than anything we've dealt with before. Fantastic, Jax grinned, though it was more a grimace. Always wanted to go out with a bang. You know, I'd prefer to just go out for drinks, Ren quipped, her sarcasm a welcome balm against the rising tide of unease. But I suppose this works too. Quillen considered their options, or rather the lack of them. The Vexari had been bad enough, but the Seraphites, they were in a whole different league and not the sort you wanted to play in. All right then, he said, injecting more confidence into his voice than he felt. We find out what this network does. If it's powerful enough to get the Seraphites' attention, maybe it's powerful enough to scare them off too. Or blow us to bits trying, Emmett pointed out, ever the optimist. Details, Quillen said with a shrug. Let's focus on not dying first and worry about the details later. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness as Yara worked her magic on the data pad. The ships hummed, the only sound cutting through the tension. Outside, the stars wheeled in their endless dance, indifferent to the drama unfolding among them. I'm in, Yara finally announced, her voice a mix of triumph and disbelief. I've accessed the network. It looks like it controls a defense grid, hidden systems spread across Orinth. A defense grid? Ren asked, leaning forward. Why would the precursors leave something like that lying around? Maybe they were planning on coming back, Yara suggested, her fingers still dancing over the pad. Or they wanted to keep unwanted guests out. Unwanted guests like the Seraphites, Emmett said, nodding slowly. So what do? We use it, Quillen replied, his mind racing. If we can figure out how to activate it, we might just have a shot at turning the tables. Or at least buying us some time, Jax added, his expression a mix of determination and mischief. And I do love a good party trick. All right, Yara, Quillen said, his voice steady despite the storm brewing outside their little fortress. Make it happen. On it, she replied, her focus narrowing to a razor's edge as she worked. The data pad hummed, lights flickering as she interfaced with systems long forgotten by time. Meanwhile, the Seraphites were closing in, their ships sleek and predatory as they cut through the void. Quillen could almost feel their arrogance, a palpable force pressing down on them. How long until they catch up? Ren asked, her voice taut with the tension of unspent energy. Not long, Jax replied, his eyes locked on the scanners. They're faster than anything we've seen, and they know it. Well, they won't be expecting an ancient surprise party, Quillen said, though his heart thudded hard against his ribs. Yara, almost there, she muttered, brow furrowed in concentration. Just a bit more. The ship rocked again, a reminder of just how precarious their situation was. The Seraphites loomed closer, their presence a shadow on the edge of perception. Got it, Yara exclaimed, breaking the silence with electric relief. The grid's coming online. Outside, the darkness was rent by sudden light as dormant defenses awoke, ancient energy flaring to life in a dazzling display. Beams of raw power arced across the void, a deadly dance of light and fury. The Seraphite ships hesitated, their advance faltering as they recalculated the threat. For a brief, shining moment, the balance of power shifted. Nice work, Yara, Quillen said, his grin as sharp as a knife's edge. Let's see how they like a taste of their own medicine. The grid pulsed, a symphony of destruction that blazed across the stars. The Seraphites twisted and turned, their arrogance a shield shattered by the unexpected force. For Quillen and his team, it was a moment of vindication, a reminder that even the smallest of ships could pack a hell of a punch. How long can it hold them off? Ren asked, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of battle. Long enough, Yara replied, her confidence a beacon in the dark. But we need to move. This is just a stay of execution. Then let's make it count, Quillen said, his gaze sweeping over his crew. They were battered, weary, but unbroken. It was enough. Jax, set a course, he ordered, the weight of command a familiar burden. We need to find out more about this artifact. And maybe, just maybe, we can use it to turn this whole mess around. On it, boss, Jax replied, his fingers flying over the controls. The ship shuddered. A reluctant steed urged back into motion. As they slipped away under the cover of the ancient grid, Quillen allowed himself a small, grim smile. They were far from safe, but they'd gained a reprieve, a chance to fight another day. And in the grim calculus of survival, sometimes that was all you could hope for. The rust bucket ship, affectionately known as the Grit, lurched again, as though protesting the abuse it had taken today. Quillen Mythos, the unflappable leader with an uncanny knack for landing them in one mess after another, leaned against the console. The stars, now a swirling backdrop, seemed unconcerned with their plight, typical cosmic indifference. So, anyone else think we're living in a bad holodrama? Quillen asked, his voice laced with a mix of gallows humor and genuine curiosity. Jax, their self-assured pilot, snorted without looking up from the controls. If we were, I'd be demanding a rewrite. No one likes a series where every episode is life or death. Or both, Ren added, her attention split between the sizzling weapon in her hands and the ever-encroaching threat on the scanner. She had a knack for sarcasm that could melt steel, or, at the very least, scorch it a bit. Yara was hunched over her data pad like a monk over sacred texts, fingers flicking across the screen in a dance of techno-arcana. According to this, the artifacts got more secrets than our dear leader's gambling debts, she said, not bothering to look up. Hey, I never lose, Quillen shot back, feigning indignation. I'm just financially challenged in perpetuity. Emmett, their resident human barricade and constant grumbler, shifted his considerable bulk, effectively filling the space near the hatch. Can it with the jokes, Quillen. We're about to be the galaxy's latest debris field if we don't figure this out. Quillen sighed, running a hand through his hair. All right, folks, let's focus. Yara, how's that decoding coming? Yara tapped a final sequence into her pad, the device letting out a triumphant beep. Got it. The artifact's message is partially decoded. Seems it's not just a key to a defense grid. It's got coordinates for something else, a weapon maybe. Another weapon. Ren raised an eyebrow, almost impressed. These precursors really didn't want anyone crashing their party, did they? Can't blame them, Jax said with a smirk. We crashed one hell of a party. The ship rocked again as another barrage from the Seraphites lit up their rear shields. Those zealots were nothing if not persistent. I swear these guys are like a bad rash, Ren muttered, gripping her weapon tighter. Quillen ignored the growing ache in his gut, the kind that told him things were on the verge of going south. Yara, can you get us those coordinates in a format Jax can use? She nodded, eyes intent on the screen. Already done. I'm sending them to the nav system now. Jax's fingers flew across his console, plotting their new course. Let's see if we can't shake these celestial bloodhounds. Punching it in 3, 2, 1. The grit surged forward, the ship's groaning protestations drowned out by the whir of its overworked engines. The view outside became a blur of stars and the occasional explosion as they left their pursuers scrambling in their wake. "So, anyone want to bet we've bought maybe 5 minutes of peace?" Quillen asked, his grin more grimace than genuine. Ren shook her head. "I'd bet, but I left all my money at that lovely casino on Lyria. Who knew you'd actually need cash to gamble?" The tension among the crew was almost a physical presence, lurking in the corners like a shadow that refused to be banished. It gnawed at Quillen, the sense that they were teetering on the edge of something far worse than they'd faced before. "We need a plan," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "This artifact, whatever it leads to, we need to figure out how to make it work for us." "That's assuming it doesn't just incinerate us first," Emmett pointed out, his voice heavy with skepticism. "Details, details," Quillen replied, dismissing the concern with a wave of his hand. "We've got bigger fish to fry," Yara snorted, "like avoiding becoming cosmic chum for the Seraphites." "Exactly," Quillen said, nodding sagely. "And I'd rather not be anyone's interstellar snack." Jax's eyes flicked to the rear sensors, a small frown tugging at his lips. "Looks like the Vexari are keeping their distance, at least for now. They probably don't want to get caught in the crossfire." "Smart move," Ren noted. "I'd do the same if I didn't have a death wish." "Guess that means we're the only idiots left in the race," Emmett grumbled, though his tone was more resigned than bitter. "Idiots or geniuses, depending on how this turns out," Quillen countered, his gaze shifting to the flickering readouts Yara had pulled up. The artifact's message was still an enigma, a puzzle missing several key pieces, but it hinted at something more, a solution lurking just out of reach, like a final piece to a terrible game. "All right, team," Quillen said, his voice cutting through the silence. "Let's see what this baby can do. If it's a weapon, maybe we can turn it on the Seraphites, or blow up half the quadrant," Jax quipped, though his voice held a note of hope. "I'm good either way. Ever the optimist," Ren said with a wry smile. "But then I'd take a big bang over a slow, painful one any day." Yara rechecked her data pad, her eyes scanning the lines of alien script. "I'm not sure what we'll find, but whatever it is, it's big. And it might just be the edge we need." "Famous last words," Emmett mumbled, though the corner of his mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. Quillen felt the weight of their hope and fear pressing down on him, a reminder of the stakes they'd chosen to play for. "If there's one thing I've learned," he said, meeting the eyes of each crew member in turn, "it's that when the universe throws you the ball, you run like hell. And hope you don't trip." The coordinates Yara decoded led them deeper into uncharted space, where the darkness was a cloak, hiding secrets even the stars had forgotten. It was a gamble, but then they'd always been gamblers at heart. "5 minutes to target," Jax announced, his voice calm despite the situation. "And this ship, she's holding together but barely. She'll make it," Quillen said, more to reassure himself than anyone else. "And if not, we'll just have to get real comfortable with vacuum." Ren chuckled, her grip on her weapon relaxing just a fraction. "I've always wanted a front row seat to a cataclysm." "Let's just hope it's not the last show we ever see," Yara muttered, her focus still on the data pad. The tension on board was a living thing, coiling around them as they sped toward the unknown. Quillen could feel it in his bones, a kind of electric anticipation that buzzed beneath the skin. 2 minutes, Jax said, his expression a mix of determination and something like excitement. The ship's journey was fraught with the threat of imminent destruction, but in that moment it felt like the calm before a storm, an eye where possibility and peril intertwined. "Once we reach the coordinates, I'll need a few seconds to bring the systems online," Yara said, her voice steady despite the stakes. "Assuming they haven't decayed into cosmic dust." Assuming we don't meet the same fate first, Emmett added, ever the realist. Quillen nodded, a slight, humorless smile playing across his features. Well, let's not keep destiny waiting. Punch it, Jax. The ship surged forward, breaking through the veil of space into a region once shrouded in mystery. What lay ahead was concealed, wrapped in layers of possibility and danger. Approaching target, Jax announced, the ship systems buzzing with a new urgency. Whatever's out there, it's big. The view beyond the viewport shifted, revealing an ancient structure suspended like a forgotten titan against the void. It was a relic of a bygone era, its architecture alien yet unmistakably purposeful. Looks like we found the heart of the network, Yara said, her voice filled with awe. Now, let's see if it has any life left in it. Or if it'll just finish us off for daring to trespass, Ren said, half serious, half joking. Quillen took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their choices like never before. Here's to hoping the precursors left us a gift and not a tomb. The ship eased closer to the structure, its surface pocked with age and the scars of forgotten battles. It was a testament to the passage of time, resilient yet fragile. Easy does it, Jax, Quillen murmured, watching as they approached the docking point. No sudden moves. Wouldn't dream of it, Jax replied, his hand steady on the controls. As they docked, the ship shuddered, settling into a tenuous embrace with the ancient construct. The silence that followed was thick, charged with expectation. All right, crew, Quillen said, his voice a mixture of resolve and the barest hint of fear. Let's wake a giant. Yara connected her data pad to the ship's console, her fingers a blur as she interfaced with systems that had lain dormant for millennia. Here goes nothing, she muttered, her focus absolute. The structure responded, lights flickering to life as if greeting old friends. Systems activated, humming with power as the network awoke from its slumber. Ren watched, her expression one of cautious optimism. Well, that's a good sign. Or the beginning of the end, Emmett observed, his skepticism tempered by a flicker of hope. Quillen stood at the forefront, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline mixed with the unknown. Whatever happens next, we face it together. As the last of the systems came online, the structure began to hum with energy, a symphony of purpose that resonated through the ship. The artifact's secrets were still theirs to uncover, but in that moment, they were no longer just a ragtag crew on a decrepit ship. They were something more, players in a game far older and more consequential than they'd ever imagined. And for the first time, the odds felt like they might just be in their favor. The grit hadn't disintegrated yet, which, in the grand scheme of things, was a minor miracle. Quillen had spent enough sleepless nights picturing the ship's main thrusters giving up the ghost at the worst possible moment. Today, despite all odds, wasn't that day. But as the Seraphites launched their full-scale assault on the Metropolis they were now orbiting, Quillen felt the familiar pit of anxiety settle like lead in his stomach. Well, this is going swimmingly, Jax shouted over the blaring alarms, managing to sound both exasperated and impressed. I wasn't planning on a fireworks show, but hey, surprise parties, right? More like a surprise execution, Ren retorted, her fingers dancing over the weapon's console as she tried to keep their shields from collapsing under the Seraphites' relentless barrage. They really want us dead. Yara's eyes flicked up from her data pad just long enough to shoot a withering glance at Quillen. I don't suppose now's a good time to mention that the artifact seems to have, let's say, mood swings. Terrific, Quillen replied, his voice dry as Martian dust. An artifact with a personality disorder, just what we needed. Without the slightest hint of humor, Emmett grunted. Great. It's like having a teenager on board. The city's defense grid was struggling to keep up with the assault, the explosions reflecting off the grid's hull like some twisted celestial disco ball. Each boom made Quillen wince, as though the ship's groans were his own. Quillen, we're gonna need a miracle, Jax said, his eyes locked on the chaos outside. Or about a dozen. Miracles were something Quillen didn't stock up on. They were too expensive and had a nasty habit of backfiring. If we can figure out how to get this artifact to work with us instead of against us, we might just pull one out of a hat. Yara was furiously typing into the data pad, the lines of alien script reflecting off her glasses. The artifact. It's not just ancient tech. It's reacting to us. Our emotions are feeding it, shaping its responses. Lovely, Ren said, narrowly avoiding an incoming missile. So we're basically holding a cosmic mood ring. Sounds about right, Quillen replied. Maybe we can try being more optimistic. Emmett snorted, the sound somehow managing to cut through the chaos. Yeah, right. I'll get on that right after I solve world peace. A sudden shudder rocked the ship, and a particularly large explosion lit up the viewport. The Seraphites were getting creative, and Quillen knew they couldn't keep this up indefinitely. Jax, how we looking? Quillen asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Like a piñata at a toddler's birthday party, Jax responded without missing a beat. We're holding, but I wouldn't start celebrating just yet. The tension inside the grit was suffocating, like the air itself was thick with dread. Quillen had always thrived in chaos, but even he was starting to feel the cracks in his usual bravado. Yara, anything from the artifact, he pressed, his voice tinged with desperation. She hesitated, her fingers pausing for a heartbeat. It's responding. The more pressure we're under, the more active it's becoming. Quillen felt a flicker of something, hope or insanity, he couldn't tell. So it's feeding off our desperation. That's something we can work with. Desperation's one thing we're not short on, Ren said, her voice wry. What do you need us to do? Hold hands and sing Kumbaya. Might as well give it a try, Emmett said. Couldn't do worse than we're doing now. Taking a deep breath, Quillen faced the crew. All right, team, let's see if we can turn this around. Focus, whatever you're feeling, directed at the artifact. Hope, fear, anger. Maybe we can push it to give us what we need. The crew exchanged skeptical glances, but they were nothing if not adaptable. Jax grinned, somehow managing to find humor in their predicament. Great. Just what I've always wanted, a career as a psychic cheerleader. The grit's interior lights flickered, and the artifact began to pulse in time with the crew's collective effort. It was as though it had a heartbeat, one that matched the frantic rhythm of their own. Come on, Yara muttered, her focus unwavering. Give us something, anything. Outside, the explosions intensified, the Seraphites closing in for the kill. It was a dance of destruction, and Quillen knew they were running out of time. Got anything, Yara? He asked, his voice barely concealing his urgency. She nodded slowly, her eyes widening as she read the data. It's opening channels. It's connecting with the city's defense systems. About time we got a little help, Ren said, her relief tempered by disbelief. The artifact's energy surged, reaching out beyond the confines of the ship. It was a lifeline, tenuous but real, and Quillen could feel it drawing strength from their collective will. Incoming message from the city, Jax announced, his voice tight with suppressed excitement. They are rerouting power to us. Quillen allowed himself a grim smile. Looks like our little mood ring just became a lifebuoy. The defense grid began to synchronize with the artifact, their combined power pushing back against the Seraphites' assault. The tide was turning, though the outcome was still far from certain. Keep it up, everyone, Quillen urged, his voice carrying a newfound determination. We're not done yet. It was a battle on two fronts, out in the void and within the confines of the grit. But for the first time, it felt like they had a chance. Incoming, Ren warned, her eyes fixed on the approaching enemy ships. They're not giving up. Neither are we, Quillen retorted, his resolve hardening. Let's show them how stubborn we can be. The grit shuddered again as they maneuvered through the chaos, the artifact's power bolstering their defenses. It was a precarious balance, like dancing on the edge of a knife, but they'd always been at their best under pressure. Yara, keep that connection stable, Jax instructed, his focus split between piloting and monitoring the readouts. We lose the link, we're toast. I'm on it, Yara replied, her concentration unwavering. The Seraphites were relentless, their zealotry driving them forward even as their ships faltered under the combined assault of the city's defenses and the artifact's power. We're getting through, Emmett noted, his voice tinged with grudging admiration. They're pulling back. Don't jinx it, Ren shot back, though her relief was palpable. Quillen felt the tension ease slightly, though he knew better than to relax completely. They'd bought themselves a reprieve, but the war was far from over. Keep pushing, he said, rallying his crew. We can do this. The artifact pulsed in response, its energy a beacon in the darkness, one that promised hope even amidst the chaos. For the first time since this nightmare began, Quillen allowed himself to believe they might just make it out alive. As the Seraphites' forces retreated, the grit hovered in the void, a battered but unbroken testament to their resilience. The crew exchanged weary but triumphant glances, knowing they'd earned a hard-fought victory. Well, Jack said with a satisfied smirk, that was fun. Let's never do it again. Ren laughed, the sound a balm against the tension. Agreed. Next time, let's just take up knitting. Emmett shook his head, his usual grumbling replaced by a grudging smile. If this is what victory feels like, I might just get used to it. Quillen nodded, his chest tight with pride for his ragtag team. We make a hell of a team. Yara's voice was soft but firm. And we still have a long way to go. The artifact's glow dimmed, its work done for now. But it remained a reminder of the strange and powerful forces that had brought them together, and the challenges that lay ahead. All right, crew, Quillen said, his voice carrying the weight of both past and future battles. Let's get the grit patched up and ready for whatever comes next. The crew nodded, their bond forged in the crucible of shared hardship and triumph. They were more than survivors. They were a family, bound by fate and choice. And as they prepared to face the next chapter, they did so with the knowledge that they were stronger together than any force that would dare to stand against them. For in the darkness of space, it was the light of humanity that shone brightest, defying the odds with grit, determination, and an unyielding spirit. The grit hovered like a bruised and battered boxer still standing in the ring out of pure spite. Quillen leaned back in his chair, staring at the artifact with a mixture of admiration and disgust. It's not every day you find ancient tech that's moodier than a hormonal teenager, he muttered, running a hand through his hair, which was as unruly as his life choices. Yeah, well, we can always add it to the list of things that hate us, Ren chimed in from the weapons console. Her fingers were still twitching from the adrenaline bath they'd all been soaking in. Right after the Seraphites and bad luck, Jax turned from the viewport, where the stars were doing their best to look indifferent to their plight. Speaking of things that hate us, what's next, Quillen? Another round of let's poke the alien tech and see what happens, Quillen snorted. Tempting, but I'd rather avoid being vaporized today, thank you very much. No, I think it's time we got a bit more creative. He glanced at Yara, who was still glued to her data pad as if it held the secrets of the universe, which in this case it sort of did. So, fearless leader, what's the plan? Emmett asked, his voice laced with the usual blend of cynicism and grudging respect. We're going to use the artifact against the Seraphites, turn their own zealotry into a liability, Quillen replied, half praying the words weren't complete and utter nonsense. Ren raised an eyebrow, skeptical yet intrigued. And how exactly do you propose we do that? Offer them a group therapy session through the artifact. More like a motivational speech with the subtlety of a sledgehammer, Quillen said. Yara, you said the artifact responds to emotions, right? Yara nodded, looking up from her pad. Yeah, it's like a cosmic amplifier. It takes what we feed it and magnifies it. Then we give it something big enough to choke on, Quillen said, his voice growing serious. We channel every ounce of defiance, every stubborn spark of resistance we have into that thing and turn it loose on the Seraphites. If it can connect with the city's defense systems, maybe it can scramble the Seraphites' communications or, hell, even their brains. Jax gave a low whistle. That's a hell of a gamble, Quillen, and that's coming from me. It's not like we've got a buffet of options, Quillen replied. Besides, any plan where we don't end up as space debris is a good one in my book. All right, I'm in, Ren said, cracking her knuckles with a grim smile. Let's give those bastards a taste of human ingenuity. Emmett shrugged, a half-smile tugging at his lips. And if it doesn't work well, at least we'll go down swinging. Optimism's a new look on you, Emmett, Jax quipped. It's almost flattering. Don't get used to it, Emmett grumbled. Just trying to keep up with the boss's pep talk. Quillen felt a swell of something dangerously close to pride. They might have been a ragtag band of misfits, but they were his misfits, and by some miracle they were ready to follow him into the abyss. Let's get to work then, Quillen said, clapping his hands together. Yara, can you rig the artifact to amplify our emotions? Make sure it's set to blast out a signal stronger than a star-going supernova. Yara nodded, already typing furiously on her data pad. I can try, but full disclosure, there's a 50% chance it'll just blow us up instead. Quillen shrugged, grinning despite himself. 50-50 odds are the best I've had all day. With the plan set, each crew member took their place, the familiar hum of the grit systems a comforting backdrop to the impending chaos. Outside, the stars continued their indifferent twinkle, as if mocking the struggles of the tiny speck of human life battling against insurmountable odds. Jax took a deep breath, summoning his inner cheerleader. All right, team, let's give that artifact a taste of what we're made of, which is mostly caffeine and poor decisions, Ren added dryly. You forgot the spite, Emmett said. And don't forget the sheer bloody-mindedness, Quillen finished, his grin widening into something feral. The artifact began to pulse once more, its energy weaving into the fabric of the ship, the crew, and beyond. It was a strange sensation, as if they were all tethered together, their emotions feeding into a singular purpose. Anything yet, Yara? Quillen asked, glancing at her, his heart pounding like a tribal drum. I think it's working, she replied, her voice filling with a cautious hope. It's reaching out, connecting with their systems. The grit shuddered, the artifact's power surging through its veins. Outside, the Seraphite ships faltered, their formations breaking into chaos as their communications turned to static-laden gibberish. Would you look at that? Ren said, her voice a mix of awe and triumph. It's actually working. Quillen let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Don't start celebrating just yet. Remember, we still have a city to save. And maybe ourselves in the process, Jax added. The Seraphites, once an unyielding tide, now scrambled in disarray. Their ships collided, weapons misfired, and the once terrifying fleet looked more like a cosmic slapstick routine. Beautiful, isn't it? Emmett said, a rare smile breaking through his usual scowl. Like watching a bunch of overzealous cultists getting their comeuppance. Remind me to thank the artifact if we survive this, Ren quipped, adjusting the weapon systems to capitalize on the Seraphites' confusion. And we will survive, Quillen said with steady conviction. Because if there's one thing humans are good at, it's refusing to die quietly. The grit danced through the chaos with renewed vigor, its crew a symphony of determination and tenacity. Each maneuver, each decision was a testament to their unity, a motley crew bound by more than duty or desperation. Incoming from the city, Jax announced, his voice tinged with excitement. They're launching a counterattack. Let's give them a hand, shall we? Quillen said, his fingers dancing over the controls, guiding the grit into the fray. Together with the city's forces, they pushed back against the Seraphites, the tide of battle turning in their favor. It was a perilous dance, each swing and swoop of the grit a step in the waltz of warfare. The artifact continued its work, amplifying the crew's shared determination into a force more potent than any weapon. It was a power that defied logic, born from the indomitable human spirit. Looks like we've got them on the run, Ren said, her voice rising above the din of battle. And not a moment too soon, Emmett grumbled, though his relief was palpable. Quillen allowed himself a moment to savor the victory as the last of the Seraphite ships were routed, retreating into the void with tails between their proverbial legs. We did it, Yara said softly, her eyes wide with disbelief. We actually did it. Quillen turned to his crew, each face etched with exhaustion and triumph. Damn right we did. And don't let anyone ever tell you humans can't work miracles. Jax let out a laugh, the sound bubbling up like the release of long-held tension. Next time, can we maybe do it without risking our necks? Where's the fun in that? Ren shot back. Emmett shook his head, his usual gruffness softened by camaraderie. Fun. I might have to reconsider my definition. The crew shared a moment of laughter, the sound a balm to their frayed nerves. They were battered, bruised, and more than a little insane, but they'd done it. They'd turned the tide against an enemy that had sought to crush them. "All right, everyone," Quillen said, his voice steady and filled with pride. "Let's get this ship patched up. We've still got a long way to go, and I don't want any of you getting too comfortable." As they got to work, repairing the grit and tending to their own wounds, they did so with the knowledge that they'd faced the abyss and hadn't blinked. They were survivors, fighters, and above all, human. And as the stars twinkled overhead, indifferent as ever, the crew of the Grit knew that whatever came next, they'd face it together, with sarcasm, defiance, and a whole lot of grit. The Grit's engines whined like a toddler denied candy, threatening to sputter out any second. Quillen, perched on the edge of a cockpit seat held together by duct tape in desperation, ran a quick mental tally of the ship's remaining durability. Roughly equivalent to a paper bag in a hurricane, he decided. But for now, they were still flying. Flying into one hell of a mess, but flying nonetheless. "All right, folks," he announced, his voice a mix of command and barely disguised panic, ready to show these Seraphite bastards what it means to pick a fight with the wrong species. Jax gave a snort, eyes glued to the viewport. "Define ready, because if it means having second thoughts while clutching a half-broken blaster, then yeah, I'm ready. Ready as I'll ever be," Ren muttered from the weapons console, fingers dancing over controls like a pianist at a particularly grim recital. "Let's give these zealots the fireworks they've been begging for." Yara, still engrossed in her data pad, muttered something that sounded suspiciously like a prayer to whatever deity watched over reckless idiots in space. Or maybe it was a curse. With Yara, it was hard to tell. Emmett leaned back, arms crossed, adopting the pose of a man who'd seen too many battles end poorly. "Well, if we're going out, at least we're going out annoying someone." "Always the optimist, Emmett," Quillen said, half a grin tugging at his lips. "Don't you ever get tired of being such a ray of sunshine only when we're not about to become space debris?" Emmett shot back, a dry chuckle escaping. Quillen adjusted the ship's trajectory, the city below a sprawling mess of lights and chaos. The defense grid flickered and flared, struggling to keep up with the Seraphite onslaught. The artifact pulsed in sync with the Grit's systems, a silent partner in their desperate stand. "Yara," Quillen called, keeping one eye on the rapidly approaching battle, "we need that artifact at full power. And I mean yesterday." "I'm on it," Yara replied, fingers flying over her pad with a speed that would make lightning envious. "But just to be clear, we're still running on 50-50 odds. Hell, that's just about the best gamble we've got," Quillen said, steering the Grit into the thick of the fray. The Seraphite ships loomed ahead, all sharp angles and menacing intent. Quillen could almost imagine their pilots, self-assured and sneering, ready to deliver their cosmic sermons at blaster point. "Ren, give me something to work with," Quillen barked. "With pleasure," Ren replied, firing off a barrage that would have made any pyromaniac weep with joy. Explosions blossomed like deadly flowers in the vacuum of space, the Seraphite formation stuttering under the assault. "Beautiful," Jax said, a hint of admiration in his voice. "It's like watching fireworks except they want to kill us. And they say romance is dead," Emmett quipped, a sardonic smile playing across his lips. The artifact pulsed again, a wave of energy rippling through the Grit, amplifying the emotions coursing through the crew. It was like sticking a finger in an electrical socket shared with a lightning storm, every nerve ending alive with raw, unfiltered intent. "Yara, how's it looking?" Quillen asked, every word layered with urgency. "It's connecting," Yara said, eyes wide as she scanned her pad. "We're linked to the city's grid." I think we can do this." "Good," Quillen said, his grip on the controls tightening. "Because if we screw this up, we're not just toast, we're the entire breakfast buffet." The Grit surged forward, a rust bucket missile aimed at the heart of the Seraphite fleet. The artifact's energy twisted through them, their collective defiance a force unto itself, wrapping around the city's systems and turning them into an extension of their will. The Seraphites were caught off guard, their communications scrambled, ships spinning out of control like marbles on a greased board. It was chaos, glorious and wild. "Would you look at that?" Jack said, all creeping into his usually blasé tone. "They're actually retreating." "Don't act too surprised," Ren said, resetting targets as if rearranging deck chairs on a sinking ship. "They probably didn't expect us to be this stubborn, or this crazy," Emmett added, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd seen too many battles from the front row. Quillen allowed himself a brief moment of elation. "All right, let's keep the pressure on." "We're not letting them regroup." The grit danced through the chaos, the artifacts' power a strange symbiosis with their own resilience, a testament to the fact that while humans might break, they rarely bent. "Ren, give them another taste," Quillen urged, adrenaline turning his voice into a fervent beat. "With pleasure," Ren replied, unleashing another salvo that sent Seraphite ships scattering like startled birds. "Yara, can we push this thing any harder?" Quillen asked, steering them through the chaos with the deftness of a gambler on a lucky streak. "I'm already pushing it to its limit," Yara replied, her voice tight with concentration. "Any more and it might just—" There was a sudden jolt, the grit shuddering as if it had hit a cosmic pothole. Lights flickered and alarms wailed, a cacophony of impending doom. "Explode," Yara finished, her voice barely audible over the din. "Fantastic," Quillen muttered, wrestling with the controls. "Everyone, hang on." The artifact flared, its energy a tidal wave crashing through the grit one last time before settling into a steady hum. The Seraphite ships faltered, the artifact's last push scrambling their systems beyond recovery. "Looks like we've got them on the ropes," Jack said, a mixture of disbelief and triumph coloring his words. The Seraphite fleet, a once mighty force of zealotry and firepower, broke formation, retreating with the grace of a drunken sailor. Their retreat wasn't so much a tactical withdrawal as it was a panicked scramble for survival. "Beautiful," Ren breathed, eyes glued to her screens. "Simply beautiful. Don't start the victory parade just yet," Quillen warned, though he couldn't keep the grin from his face. "We're not out of the woods, out of the woods." Emmett echoed, shaking his head. "We're deep in the forest and someone's just set it on fire." "Optimism," Quillen said, chuckling despite himself. "It's a new look on you," Emmett snorted, a sound that was half amusement, half exhaustion. "Don't get used to it." The city's forces, emboldened by the turn of events, launched their counterattack with renewed vigor, turning the tide against the retreating Seraphites. Together, they created a symphony of defiance, a testament to humanity's stubborn refusal to go gently into any good night. The artifact, its role fulfilled, simmered down to a quiet presence, a reminder of the gamble that had paid off. For now, at least. "Well," Yara said, letting out a breath she'd been holding, "that was something." "Something indeed," Quillen agreed, steering the grid into a more stable orbit. "And here I thought today would be boring." "Your idea of boring is skewed," Jack said, shaking his head in mock disbelief. "Welcome to life on the grit," Quillen replied, grinning at his crew. "Where the only certainty is uncertainty." They shared a moment of laughter, the sound a balm to frayed nerves and battle-weary minds. They were victorious against all odds, and that was something worth celebrating, at least until the next crisis. "All right, crew," Quillen said, his tone turning serious, "let's get this ship back in working order. We've still got a job to do, and I'd rather not do it in a ship that's one engine failure away from becoming a very expensive coffin." "On it, fearless leader," Ren said, already moving to her assigned tasks. As they set to work, patching up the grit and taking stock of their battered resources, there was a sense of camaraderie that transcended the chaos. They were a ragtag band of misfits, held together by duct tape, defiance, and a healthy dose of irreverence. "Hey, Quillen," Jax called, a grin tugging at his lips. "Think the Seraphites have learned their lesson?" Quillen chuckled, shaking his head. "Doubt it, but let's hope they're slow learners." Gives us a bit of breathing room, Emmett grunted, adjusting a panel that looked about as broken as its owner. Breathing room sounds nice. Almost like a vacation. I'll remember that next time we're not being shot at, Quillen promised, though they all knew how unlikely that was. As they worked, the city below began to rebuild, the battle scars a reminder of the price of defiance. But there was hope too, a flicker of something that could grow into a flame with time and effort. The grit hummed beneath their feet, a wounded beast still eager for the hunt. They were victorious, at least for now, and that was something to be proud of. "Well, team," Quillen said, surveying the aftermath with a sense of satisfaction, "I'd say we've earned ourselves a drink. Or several." The crew nodded, each more than ready to embrace a well-earned reprieve. "Let's make it a good one," Wren said, a rare smile lighting her features. "Agreed," Emmett added, a hint of warmth in his usually gruff tone. With the stars twinkling indifferently above, the crew of the Grit turned their thoughts to the future. Whatever lay ahead, they'd face it together, with sarcasm, stubbornness, and a hell of a lot of grit. Quillen Mythos leaned back in the chair, letting out a long breath that rattled through the cockpit like an old engine. The Grit, somehow still holding together, groaned around him in harmonic agreement. The crew was still buzzing with the afterglow of adrenaline, but the reality of their survival was starting to settle in. The city below, a sprawling mess of lights and chaos, was still standing, a testament to their reckless ingenuity. "Well," Quillen said, breaking the silence, "we lived, again." Jack's eyes still glued to the viewport snorted. "Gotta admit, I had my doubts. Thought this was the time we'd end up as space dust." "Wishful thinking," Wren commented from her place at the weapons console. Her fingers were tapping out a rhythm that suggested she was already itching for the next battle. Seraphites should have stuck to sermons and left war to the professionals. "Professionals, huh?" Yara piped up, her data pad still in hand. "And here I was thinking we just made it up as we went along." "That's practically a job description in this line of work," Emmett added, leaning against a bulkhead with all the grace of a man who'd seen more than his fair share of bad endings. Quillen chuckled, though there was a weight behind it. Funny how surviving by the skin of your teeth had a way of making you feel alive in the worst possible way. "Let's get the Grit back in one piece before we pat ourselves on the back. I'd rather not tempt fate twice in one day." "Good plan," Wren said, already moving to inspect the damage. "This rust bucket's tougher than it looks, but even it has its limits." With the battle over, the city below began to pick up the pieces. Smoke still curled into the sky, but the defense grid was holding, flickering like a heartbeat that had just been given a new lease on life. Quillen watched the activity below, a flurry of ships and shuttles moving to repair and rebuild. "You think the artifact did most of the work?" Jax asked, still half lost in thought as he watched the remnants of the Seraphite fleet retreating into the void. "Didn't hurt," Quillen replied. "But it was us who made the difference. The artifact just gave us the edge." Yara looked up, eyes bright with the kind of excitement usually reserved for discovering a new species or finding out your favorite dive bar hadn't burned down. "You know, this thing," she said, tapping the artifact, "could be a game changer. If we play our cards right, or blow us all to hell," Emmett grumbled, ever the optimist. "But sure, let's think positive." "Hey, fear of imminent death is a great motivator," Quillen said, standing up and stretching out the kinks from his back. "Besides, it's not the first time we've danced with something we didn't understand." Yara snorted, her fingers still working over the glowing data pad. "True, but I prefer my suicide missions with a side of certainty, thank you." Quillen grinned at her. "Certainty's overrated." The artifact, now quiet and subdued, sat in its cradle like a cat that had finally decided to stop toying with its prey. It was a strange comfort, knowing that for all its unpredictability, it had helped them stand against odds that would have made Las Vegas blush. "So what now?" Jax asked, turning his attention back to the room. "We can't just sit here admiring the fireworks. We fix the ship, we get paid, and we do it all over again," Quillen replied, his voice firm with the kind of resolve that came from having nothing left to lose. Or we find somewhere quiet and pretend we're not wanted by every power-hungry idiot in the quadrant. Quiet sounds nice, Ren said, a rare note of wistfulness in her voice. But it's never as quiet as you hope. Sounds like a vacation to me, Emmett said, a dry chuckle escaping. I'll even wear a Hawaiian shirt. Quillen shook his head. I'd pay to see that. Dream on, Emmett retorted, though there was a twinkle in his eye that suggested he wasn't entirely against the idea. As the crew set to work, patching up the grit and taking stock of their supplies, there was a sense of camaraderie that transcended the chaos. They were a ragtag band of misfits, held together by duct tape, defiance, and a healthy dose of irreverence. The kind of crew you'd want by your side when the universe decided to throw its worst at you. Hey, Quillen, Yara called, a grin tugging at her lips. Think the Seraphites have learned their lesson, Quillen chuckled, shaking his head. Doubt it, but let's hope they're slow learners. Gives us a bit of breathing room. Emmett grunted, adjusting a panel that looked about as broken as its owner. Breathing room sounds nice. Almost like a vacation. I'll remember that next time we're not being shot at, Quillen promised, though they all knew how unlikely that was. As they worked, the city below began to rebuild, the battle scars a reminder of the price of defiance. But there was hope too, a flicker of something that could grow into a flame with time and effort. The grit hummed beneath their feet, a wounded beast still eager for the hunt. They were victorious, at least for now, and that was something to be proud of. Quillen watched his crew, their banter a familiar soundtrack to the chaos of their lives. They were battered, bruised, and victorious. Against all odds, they'd faced down the Seraphites and won. Well, team, Quillen said, surveying the aftermath with a sense of satisfaction, I'd say we've earned ourselves a drink. Or several, the crew nodded, each more than ready to embrace a well-earned reprieve. Let's make it a good one, Ren said, a rare smile lighting her features. Agreed, Emmett added, a hint of warmth in his usually gruff tone. With the stars twinkling indifferently above, the crew of the Grit turned their thoughts to the future. Whatever lay ahead, they'd face it together, with sarcasm, stubbornness, and a hell of a lot of grit. The city, now a beacon of resilience, continued to pulse with life below them. The artifact, now silent, had been a key player in this improbable victory, a symbol of human perseverance in the face of overwhelming odds. Its power lay dormant, waiting perhaps for the next misfit crew needing a miracle. Think we'll ever use this thing again? Jax asked, gesturing towards the artifact. Maybe, Quillen replied, but I hope not. Once was enough excitement for a lifetime. Who would have thought, Yara mused, that an ancient piece of tech would end up being our best ally, or our most dangerous enemy, Emmett pointed out, ever the realist. But not today, Quillen said, his voice filled with a rare sense of peace. Today we're the victors. They stood there, a moment of silence shared among them, a brief pause in the chaos of their lives. The universe was still a dangerous place, full of surprises and threats, but for now they'd done the impossible, and that was enough. So, drinks? Ren asked, breaking the silence with a grin. Drinks, Quillen agreed, leading the way. Let's raise a glass to surviving another day in this mad universe. As they headed toward the mess hall, laughter and banter filled the air, a reminder that no matter how dire things became, they'd face it together. As the crew of the Grit settled into the aftermath, the city below began to breathe again, its people slowly emerging from the ruins to rebuild what had been lost. The artifact, a silent witness to their triumph, remained a symbol of human tenacity, an ancient reminder that even in the darkest times, there was always a glimmer of hope, however small. And though the stars above cared little for the struggles of mortals, for one fleeting moment, it felt as if the universe itself had smiled upon them. The crew of the Grit, a ragtag band of misfits, had faced the storm and emerged on the other side, scarred but unbeaten. They were united in their resolve, their bond forged in the fires of adversity. Together, they defied the odds and won a small yet significant victory, one that would echo through the stars long after they were gone. As the Grit drifted through the vastness of space, its engines humming a familiar tune, Quillen knew that whatever lay ahead, they'd face it with the same irreverence and grit that had brought them this far. After all, in a universe that thrived on chaos, they'd learned to thrive right along with it. And so, with laughter and the clinking of glasses, they toasted to their improbable victory, to the bonds that held them together, and to the indomitable spirit that refused to be broken. Together, they'd continue to navigate the treacherous waters of the cosmos, one reckless adventure at a time.